People like you don't belong here." The words didn't float. They detonated. Then came the strike sharp, deliberate, a palm crashing against brown skin in the middle of a marble gallery lit by chandeliers. The sound cracked through the vaulted ceiling, louder than any string quartet could play, louder than any polite applause could mask. An elderly matriarch in black silk, her pearls trembling with each breath, had raised her hand without hesitation. She struck as if enforcing tradition, as if centuries of entitlement gave her the right to silence someone with skin she did not approve of. Gasps erupted. A young woman in yellow dropped her champagne glass, crystal shattering across polished stone. A man in cobalt froze mid-step, his jaw unhinged, pupils wide. Phones lifted like weapons, blue screens glowing in every corner. But the woman in white, she did not waver. Her gown clung to her form like armor, her stillness radiating more force than any slap could steal. Eyes forward, chin steady, arms folded across her body, not in defense but in command. "Did she just hit her?" a voice whispered, quivering. "She did," another breathed, disbelief dripping like venom. The matriarch leaned closer, voice venomous, amplified by the hush that fell. "You will never sit at our table. You will never be one of us." The words landed heavier than the slap. They carried history, centuries of gates closed, doors barred, voices silenced. And yet, in this hall of portraits and oil-painted airs, the only one unshaken was the woman who had been struck. She stood anchored, not a flinch, not a twitch, just silence so heavy it bent the room around her. The silence of someone who has heard it all before, endured it all before, and chosen not to shatter. Because this wasn't just humiliation, this was exposure. The family thought they were protecting their empire. What they didn't know was that their empire already had new owners. But before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories matter because they reveal what power really looks like. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The matriarch's hand trembled in the air, the gallery buzzing with shock. Eyes darted from guest to guest, as if waiting for someone to justify what they had just seen. None did. Even the statues carved in marble seemed to recoil, as if ancient stone recognized cruelty. And the woman in white, she breathed, steady, unbroken. To them, she was nothing but an intruder, a mistake in silk, a face that didn't match the guest list. But to herself, she was the reason the gala existed. The force behind the billion-dollar deal everyone had come to celebrate. The family had swung their hand, thinking they owned the room. They had no idea they'd just slapped its owner. She hadn't come with an entourage, no security detail, no flashing jewels to announce her wealth. Only a white gown, sleek, quiet, disarming in its simplicity. She had chosen it deliberately, because she knew this night wasn't about blending in. It was about revealing who stood apart. Her name was Naomi Cole, 41, self-made. The architect of a global conglomerate that had reshaped entire markets. And yet tonight, she had walked through the vaulted doors of the city's most exclusive gala as if she were invisible. And that invisibility, that was the point. For months, the whispers had circled. The Bennett family, billionaires for 3 generations, were preparing to close a $1B merger. They believed they were hosting the night's power. They thought the spotlight belonged to them. What they didn't know was that Naomi had been quietly acquiring the leverage piece by piece until the entire transaction rested on her signature. But she hadn't told them. Not yet. She wanted to see them as they truly were when they thought no one of consequence was watching. She wanted to hear the jokes, the sneers, the unfiltered contempt that surfaced whenever someone they didn't recognize crossed their gates. And now, she had heard it, felt it literally across her face. The gala itself dripped with ostentation. Gilded frames stretching from marble floor to vaulted ceiling. Statues aligned like silent jurors. Waiters gliding with trays of champagne that sparkled under chandeliers. The kind of room designed to intimidate anyone who didn't belong. Naomi had walked in alone. Guests in satin gowns and sharp tuxedos had barely looked up, dismissing her as an accessory, maybe a companion to some unseen guest. That was always the assumption. Never the head, never the owner, always the +1. And she let them assume. Because every step she took across the marble had been a test. Every second she stood silent after the slap was a mirror. She was giving them rope and they were tying the noose themselves. Naomi's gaze moved slowly across the hall. She had studied boardrooms more cutthroat than this. She had faced down banks that bet against her, CEOs who called her a high risk, partners who insisted she bring a white male colleague into meetings so they'd feel comfortable. She had seen it all. Tonight was just another verse in the same tired song. But this time, she wasn't just a guest. She was the one with the pen, the deal in play, the billion-dollar decision that could crown or collapse the family who now stood around her, shaking with rage at her presence. Naomi exhaled once, calm. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't moved an inch. Yet the air in the gallery already tilted. Some guests leaned forward, their phones still raised. Others shrank back, unsure which side to stand on, because somewhere deep in the unease, they sensed it. The woman in white was not who they thought she was, and before the night ended, they would know exactly how wrong they had been. "Security!" the son barked, voice booming across the marble hall. "Remove this woman now." His tuxedo was cut sharp, but his posture sagged with entitlement. He pointed as though he were issuing a royal decree, expecting instant obedience. And for a heartbeat, the room seemed ready to oblige. Two guards at the edge of the gallery shifted, their black jackets rippling under the chandelier light. Guests murmured. One woman whispered, "She must have snuck in." Another muttered, "These galas aren't open doors." Their words weren't loud, but they carried the kind of murmurs that feed arrogance. The matriarch smirked, emboldened by the chorus. "I warned you," she said, her pearls trembling with indignation. "You thought you could slip past us? Pretend to belong?" But Naomi didn't move. Her stillness felt louder than the accusations. She stood in her white gown like stone planted in water, calm ripples radiating outward. One of the guards took a cautious step closer. His shoes clicked against the marble, each sound puncturing the silence. He didn't draw his hand to her arm yet, but the intention was written all over his stance. Then another voice cut through higher, sharper, mocking. The daughter draped in yellow silk. "She's lucky we didn't toss her out at the door," she sneered. "Look at her. She doesn't even know which fork to use." A few guests chuckled nervously, the laughter fragile, forced. Naomi's lips parted slightly, but not to defend herself, only to breathe, steady, measured. She had seen this scene before in boardrooms, in banks, in boutiques that claimed her card was suspicious. Different stage, same script. The son raised his hand again, waving toward the guards. "Enough waiting. She's wasting our time. Escort her out." The crowd shifted like a tide, bodies leaning away as if to clear a path for her removal. And yet, in the corner, a young event staffer froze. He held a tray of champagne flutes, eyes wide, phone angled slightly downward, red light blinking. "Recording," Naomi noticed. She met his gaze, brief, piercing, a silent message. "Don't stop." The matriarch, catching the moment, snarled. "Put that phone down. No one records in this hall." Her command cracked, revealing not authority but fear. But it was too late. The air had changed. What began as a private humiliation was now slipping into public spectacle. Guests at the back craned their necks. A journalist in a black dress lowered her pen, lifted her phone instead. And in that swelling silence, Naomi spoke for the first time. Her voice was low, steady, unshaken. "I'm not leaving." 3 words, enough to split the night open. The matriarch staggered back half a step, as though struck by an invisible hand. The son's smirk faltered. The daughter's laugh died in her throat. Because Naomi hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't lashed out. And yet, with those 3 words, she shifted the weight of the room. It was no longer about an uninvited guest. It was about a woman refusing to vanish. And that refusal, that calm defiance, was the spark that would ignite the reckoning. The room braced for an explosion. But none came. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't swing back. She simply inhaled, slow and deliberate, as though gathering the very oxygen from the chandeliers above. Her silence wasn't empty, it was pressure, compressing the gallery tighter than any command could. The guards hesitated. Their polished shoes no longer clicked forward. Even they sensed it, the strange authority radiating not from title, but from composure. The son scoffed, trying to fill the silence. "She's bluffing," he muttered, loud enough for those nearest to hear. If she were important, she'd have said so already. His tone quivered on the last word, betraying unease. Naomi's eyes drifted to him, unblinking. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The pause itself was its own verdict. Around her, the crowd fidgeted. Champagne glasses tilted. Necklaces swayed against anxious skin. The laughter that had once mocked her had curdled into something else, restlessness. The matriarch pressed forward, desperate to reclaim control. You stand here, in silk you don't deserve, pretending at elegance. Do you think silence will save you? Her voice rose, cracking against the gallery walls. Naomi stayed still, her shoulders square, her gaze level, her calm, a mirror that reflected their fury back at them. It unsettled the room more than shouting ever could. In the corner, the staffer's phone light glowed red. He trembled, tray quivering, yet he kept recording. His silence matched hers, two witnesses, one to history, one to truth. A guest whispered, "Why isn't she defending herself?" Another answered, "Maybe she doesn't have to." Naomi finally moved, not with words, but with the smallest gesture. She adjusted the fall of her gown, smoothing it with her palm as though brushing away the slap, the insult, the entire weight of their contempt. Then her hands folded once more at her waist, serene. Her composure was unbearable. The daughter hissed, "This is pathetic. Why won't she leave?" Her voice trembled with something unspoken. Fear that the woman in white wasn't an intruder at all, but something far more dangerous, an equal. Still, Naomi stood. No protest, no plea, just presence. It was a presence that spoke louder than any accusation hurled at her. I will not break. I will not bend. I will not vanish. The silence stretched until even the chandeliers seemed to buzz with unease. And in that silence, something shifted. The family, once sure of their dominance, looked suddenly small, raging, flailing, diminished against the calm they could not shake. Naomi's patience was not weakness. It was the blade she had honed for decades. And tonight, it would cut deeper than any slap ever could. The silence couldn't hold forever. It cracked not from Naomi, but from the edges of the room. A clink of glass, a gasp too loud to ignore. Then the faint but unmistakable glow of cameras rising, one by one, as if the crowd itself had found a spine. Near the back, a young reporter from a mid-tier magazine had lowered her pen and lifted her phone. Her hands shook, but her lens was steady, recording every breath in the gallery. She whispered to the woman beside her, "This is history. Don't look away." Closer still, the staffer with the champagne tray shifted his grip. The red recording light blinked against the crystal flutes. He looked barely 20, a shadow in the corner, but in his eyes lived a conviction. Naomi recognized the quiet fury of someone who'd seen this too many times. Guests whispered, voices rippling through the marble like wind. She didn't even flinch. Why are they treating her like that? Is she someone important? The questions didn't have answers yet, but the act of asking changed the air. The matriarch noticed. Her eyes snapped toward the phones, her tone sharp, cracking under panic. "Stop recording, this is private property!" But her voice betrayed her. Too shrill, too late. Every word was now part of a growing archive she could not erase. One guest, a man in a navy tuxedo, mid-40s, stepped forward, not toward Naomi, but toward the family. "This doesn't look right," he muttered. "She hasn't done anything." His voice wasn't loud, but in the charged silence it carried like thunder. The son sneered, "You don't know what you're talking about." His posture sagged with irritation, but his confidence wavered. He had expected obedience. Instead, he got witnesses. The daughter hissed, "She doesn't belong here, can't you see that?" But her words landed softer than she intended, drowned out by the unmistakable buzz of a live-stream comment feed echoing faintly from the back of the hall. Someone had already gone live. Naomi turned her head slightly, not enough to speak, not enough to break her composure, but enough to catch the eye of the young reporter. Their gazes locked for a single second. The reporter swallowed hard, then whispered, almost like a vow, "I see you." That was all Naomi needed. She didn't nod. She didn't smile. But the message had landed. And the crowd felt it too. This was no longer just a humiliation. It was evidence. It was accountability. The gallery, once a stage built for one family's dominance, had become an audience chamber, and the audience was no longer silent. The witnesses had arrived. The witnesses should have silenced them, but arrogance rarely knows when to stop. The sun, flushed red beneath the chandelier glow, jabbed a finger at Naomi. "Enough of this circus. She's not a guest. She's not on the list. She's a fraud. Throw her out." The guards stiffened, but their hesitation grew. Too many eyes, too many phones. They weren't just removing a woman anymore, they were stepping into a storm. The matriarch sensed their reluctance and lashed out with her voice. Do your job? You think appearances of equality will protect this family? She came here to disrupt us, to humiliate us in our own hall. Her tone cracked like thunder, but behind it pulsed something weaker fear. Gasps spread. The reporter's phone caught every syllable. The live stream comments scrolled fast. Racist. Unbelievable. Don't touch her. Naomi remained motionless. Her silence screamed louder than their rage. The daughter, desperate to reclaim control, grabbed a crystal flute from a passing tray and tipped it, golden champagne spilling like venom. The droplets splattered across Naomi's gown, glistening under the lights. Now she looks the part, the daughter sneered. A collective gasp tore through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Did she just?" Another hissed, "This is too far." Naomi only lowered her eyes to the stain, then raised them again, calm, steady. The insult slid off her skin like water, but the room itself could not absorb it. The air curdled, heavy with disgust, not for her, but for them. The navy tuxedo guest stepped closer, his voice firmer now. "This is assault. She's done nothing, and you're parading your cruelty in front of everyone." His words broke the fragile alliance the family had clung to. Some guests nodded. Others murmured agreement. The tide was shifting. But the son wouldn't relent. He snapped at the guards, louder this time, his arrogance fraying into desperation. "Security! Remove her before this gets worse!" Naomi finally moved just her hand, smoothing her gown where the champagne had fallen. Then she folded it again at her waist. Her stillness was a blade. Every second she refused to flinch cut deeper into their facade of power. The matriarch's voice cracked once more, harsher, louder. "She is nothing, and we will not let her stand among us." But for the first time, the family's words didn't land. They echoed into a room no longer fully theirs. The crowd was no longer whispering. It was judging, recording, choosing. And Naomi stood in the center, silent as stone, letting them destroy themselves with every word. The gallery was already tense, vibrating like a string pulled too tight. And then it snapped. The son lunged forward, snatching Naomi's clutch from her hand. "Let's see what's really in here," he barked, his voice half arrogant, half panicked. Gasps rippled across the room as he tore it open and dumped its contents across a linen-covered banquet table. A slim phone, a silver pen, a single access badge glinted under the chandelier light. He seized it, holding it up like a prize. "Fake," he sneered. "Cheap prop." He tossed it onto the floor. The matriarch clapped once, as if sealing the verdict. "Security, remove her. She is no guest, she is a thief." But the crowd didn't clap with her. They recoiled. Murmurs turned sharp. "That's theft. They're going too far. Why are they treating her like this?" The daughter added venom, stepping close enough for the cameras to catch every word. "Do you understand?" she hissed. "You will never sit at our table. You'll never touch our name, our power." And then she struck. Not a slap this time, something quieter, crueler. She picked up her champagne again, and with deliberate grace, poured it slow over Naomi's white gown until the fabric clung wet against her skin. Gasps ignited around the room like fire. Phones surged higher. Flashes lit the marble like lightning. The matriarch smirked. The daughter stepped back, satisfied. The son spread his arms as if to declare victory. "Now everyone can see who she really is," he crowed. Naomi did not move, not when her belongings were scattered like trash, not when her gown soaked through with humiliation, not when their voices sliced at her like knives. Her stillness was unbearable. The navy tuxedo guest broke first, voice sharp as steel. "That's enough. This isn't power. This is disgrace." Others echoed him. Some guests even stepped forward, not to touch Naomi, but to stand closer as if proximity alone was a shield. The guards froze, caught between orders and optics. They could see the tide shifting. The family barked commands, but their authority faltered with every raised phone, every recording red light. Naomi finally looked down at the puddle forming at her feet. Then she raised her gaze slowly, deliberately, meeting the eyes of every accuser in turn. Her voice, when it came, was low, steady, unbroken. "You've shown them exactly who you are." The matriarch's smirk faltered. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. Because the truth was undeniable now. They hadn't exposed Naomi. They had exposed themselves, and the reckoning was about to begin. The gallery buzzed like a hive cracked open. Voices clashed, phones hovered, security hesitated. For a long moment, it looked as if chaos might decide the night. But Naomi shifted just one step. The marble under her heels echoed louder than all their shouting. She bent, not in defeat, but in precision, gathering the scattered belongings they had flung across the banquet table. One by one, she placed them back into her clutch. The phone last. She held it in her palm, thumb pressing once, deliberate. Somewhere across the city, in a glass tower where the real power lived, a signal lit up. Naomi lifted the device to her ear. Her voice was calm, as if none of the chaos around her mattered. "Activate protocol," she said. The words sliced the air. Protocol. The young staffer in the corner blinked, recording every second. The reporter mouthed the word to herself. The family stiffened, though none of them knew why. On the other end, a voice answered a woman's, steady, professional. "Protocol engaged. We're live across the board. Do you want confirmation feed pushed public?" Naomi's eyes swept the room, resting for a heartbeat on the matriarch's trembling pearls, on the champagne still dripping from her gown, on the guards caught between orders and witnesses. Then she answered, clear, quiet, "Not yet. Stand by." The son barked, trying to reclaim the narrative. "What is this? Some performance? You think a phone call makes you important?" His laughter was brittle, cracking at the edges. Naomi turned her gaze to him, unblinking. Her silence lasted just long enough to unnerve him, then she spoke. "You're not in control of this room anymore." Gasps rippled. A guest near the back whispered, "Did you hear that?" Another murmured, "She's not bluffing." The daughter sneered, raising her glass again. "You're nothing. Stop pretending you belong." Naomi didn't look at her. She looked past her to the witnesses, to the cameras, to the tide already shifting. Then back to her phone. "Begin internal audit. Timestamp everything from the moment I arrived." "Logged," the voice replied instantly. The matriarch snapped, voice cracking. "Who are you talking to? You don't have authority here." Naomi's eyes met hers, steady as stone. "I have more authority here than you will ever admit." The words landed like a hammer. The family bristled, but the crowd leaned in. The balance was shifting, and everyone could feel it. For the first time that night, Naomi was no longer the target. She was the axis, the one turning the room. And the family, so certain, so untouchable, was suddenly dancing on strings they didn't know existed. The matriarch's command still echoed, "You don't have authority here." But the words rang hollow, too shrill, too desperate. Naomi lowered her phone, letting the silence settle again. The gallery seemed to contract around her, every chandelier crystal humming with tension. She stepped forward, just one measured pace, and the room leaned with her. Her voice came calm, unwavering. "You've been demanding to know who I am." The son smirked, arms crossed, clinging to arrogance like a shield. "Finally, tell them. Expose yourself for the fraud you are." Naomi's gaze cut through him. She didn't look at him as an equal. She looked at him the way an executive studies a liability. Then she turned not to the family, but to the crowd, to the witnesses, to the cameras glowing red. "I am Naomi Cole," she said. Her words carried like steel striking stone. "Founder and CEO of Cole Global, lead investor in tonight's $1 billion merger." The gallery broke. Gasps ricocheted like thunder. The reporter nearly dropped her phone, catching herself at the last second, whispering, "Oh my God." The staffer in the corner whispered, "I knew it," though he hadn't known at all, only felt it. Naomi continued, each syllable deliberate. "This gala you've so carefully staged, this deal you think belongs to you, it does not move without my signature." The matriarch stumbled half a step back, pearls quivering at her throat. The daughter's glass slipped in her grip, champagne sloshing onto her gown. The son blinked rapidly, his smirk evaporating. Naomi's eyes scanned them one by one. "And tonight, you chose to strike me, humiliate me, call me a thief in a room that does not exist without me." Phones shook in hands, now guests desperate to capture every second. The live stream comments spiked, thousands pouring in. "She owns it? Justice. They're finished." Naomi's voice deepened, steady, final. "You wanted me out, but the truth is I am the reason you are in." The gallery erupted not in applause yet, but in raw, stunned disbelief. People leaned to each other, whispering, recording, realizing they had just witnessed the moment the narrative flipped. The family stood frozen, their power shattered in the span of one revelation. And Naomi, still calm, still composed, had only just begun. The reveal detonated across the gallery. The matriarch's face drained, pearls rattling at her throat like loose chains. Her lips moved, but no sound followed, only a thin gasp, the sound of power collapsing under its own weight. The son stammered, This is impossible." His bravado shattered, words tripping over each other. The smirk that once armored him was gone, leaving only a boy trembling in a man's tuxedo. The daughter's hand shook so violently her champagne glass slipped, shattering against the marble. She bent to gather the shards, but froze midway, realizing all eyes were not on the mess she'd made, but on her. Her cheeks flushed crimson, shame dripping heavier than the spilled drink. Around them, the crowd surged with whispers that grew into a hum, then a chorus. "She owns the deal." They tried to humiliate her. "And she's the CEO?" The young reporter, still streaming, turned the camera to her own face, breathless. "You're watching this live. Naomi Cole, yes. That Naomi Cole was just assaulted in the middle of the gala by the family she came to partner with." Her voice cracked, part disbelief, part awe. The staffer with the champagne tray lowered it to the floor, stepping forward now, eyes wide. He didn't speak, he didn't have to. His recording had captured everything. Security shifted uneasily. One guard glanced at the other, whispering, "She's the investor. We laid hands on her." The other muttered back, "We didn't touch her, but we almost did." Their hands fell to their sides. They would not move against her again. The matriarch tried once more, her voice shrill, breaking, "She's lying. She has to be lying." But even as she said it, the words withered, because no one believed her anymore. Guests shook their heads. A man in navy muttered, "You disgraced yourselves." A woman near the front added, "I've never seen such cruelty. And now it's recorded forever." Phones lifted higher, every angle captured, every whisper broadcast. The family's wealth couldn't buy silence now. Not tonight. The daughter covered her face with one trembling hand, mascara streaking. The son tugged at his tie as if choking. The matriarch staggered back into a chair, shoulders collapsing under invisible weight. They weren't just losing control of a gala. They were losing the narrative. The myth of untouchable dominance had shattered in real time. And at the center, Naomi stood unbothered, calm, measured, watching their empire crumble without lifting more than her voice. The gallery that once bowed to the family now tilted toward her. Guests whispered her name. Witnesses clung to their recordings. And the Bennett's titans of legacy wealth looked suddenly small, brittle, exposed. For the first time in decades, they were no longer feared. They were pitied. And Naomi hadn't even delivered the final blow. The gallery was silent now, but not still. It pulsed, every breath held, every phone raised, waiting for what Naomi would do next. She stepped forward, slow, deliberate, until she stood at the very heart of the marble floor. The shards of glass from the daughter's broken flute glittered around her heels like fallen crowns. She did not step aside. She stood on them. Her phone rose once more to her ear, calm, controlled. "Carla," she said. The voice on the other end was crisp, standing by. "Terminate the Bennett contract," Naomi said, her tone as even as if she were ordering tea. "Effective immediately." Gasps tore through the hall. The matriarch shot up from her chair. "You can't! You don't have the power." Naomi cut across her without raising her volume. "It was never yours to give." The son lunged forward, desperation cracking through his arrogance. "Wait, we can renegotiate." Naomi's gaze sliced him in two. "You don't negotiate with people who strike you. You erase them from the table." On the other end, Carla confirmed, her voice sharp, final. "Contract nullified. Access revoked. Press release drafted. Do you want it sent now?" "Yes," Naomi said. "Send it." Ugh. Within seconds, phones buzzed across the hall. Guests glanced down, eyes widening at the notification. Cole Global terminates partnership with the Bennett family effective immediately. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some shocked, some exhilarated. The reporter nearly shouted into her stream, "It's official. She just walked away from $1 billion deal on the spot." The matriarch's voice broke into a scream. "You'll regret this. Our name is legacy. Our wealth is unmatched." "Ugh." Naomi turned to her, gaze steady as stone. "Wealth without dignity is rot. And tonight, the world saw the truth." The daughter wept openly now, mascara streaking down her face. The son crumpled into silence, tugging at his collar as if drowning in his own tuxedo. Naomi lowered her phone, slipping it back into her clutch. She straightened her gown, stained with champagne, shimmering under the light like armor. "This deal is finished," she declared. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the gallery. "And so is your illusion of power." Applause broke first a ripple, then a wave. Guests who had been frozen in fear now erupted with claps, cheers, shouts. Some stood between Naomi and the family, a barrier of solidarity. Others simply raised their phones higher, ensuring the world would remember this night. The Bennetts had been untouchable. Now, they were undone by their own hand, by their own arrogance, and by the quiet resolve of the woman they tried to erase. Naomi had not shouted. She had not struck back. She had only spoken, and in speaking, ended them. The gallery thundered with applause, but Naomi did not bask in it. She stood still, waiting for the wave of claps and shouts to crest and fade, her calm presence cutting sharper than any ovation. When the room finally quieted, she spoke. "You thought silence meant weakness," Naomi said, her voice steady, every word slicing the air clean. "You mistook dignity for submission, and tonight, that mistake cost you everything." Her gaze swept across the marble floor over the shattered glass, over the champagne stain drying on her gown, over the family that once loomed but now cowered in the corner. "I don't need to fight for a seat at your table," she continued. "I own the table, and I choose who sits." Gasps erupted again, followed by cheers. Phones surged higher. Guests clapped not just for her words, but for the truth of them. The matriarch collapsed back into her chair, face ashen. The son covered his mouth, trembling. The daughter wept openly, mascara dripping like ink on parchment. Naomi turned toward the doors of the gallery. Each step she took echoed across marble, steady as a drumbeat of finality. Guests parted instinctively, forming a path. Some reached out not to stop her, but to honor her, hands hovering in respect. She paused at the threshold, bathed in the golden glow spilling from the chandelier behind her. Cameras caught her silhouette framed against the exit, a figure carved from composure and power. Her final words rang out low, unshaken, eternal. "Power isn't granted. Power is owned. And tonight, I decided not to share it." The doors opened wide. Naomi walked through without looking back. Inside, the applause roared like thunder. Outside, the night stretched endless, alive with possibility. And in that single walkout, she had done what billions of dollars never could. She had restored dignity. Not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. The cameras kept rolling. The world would see. And Naomi Cole never needed to shout. Her silence had been enough. Her power had spoken.